The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous supporters. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/donate. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode number 93.
I'm a doctor. I've lived for over 2,000 years. I am Scottish. I can complain about things. Shush.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. Today we're discussing the 6th Doctor story, Attack of the Cybermen. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
So before we get into Attack of the Cybermen, I just want to mention a bit of feedback I got from my mother-in-law, who is also a Doctor Who fan and listens to the podcast. So I only say nice things about her on the podcast.
You're on good terms with your mother-in-law. How about that?
Yeah. My mother-in-law is a super geek. So just
nice.
So nice. I'll say nice things about her now. She's also a computer expert. So anybody who has computer problems, you can talk to. Grandma Nerd is her. Actually, she's Mama Nerd is her business name in Austin, Texas. And she's been doing computers for about 50 years. So
nice.
But she's also a super geek. So, but she gave me this great tip, which is that, you know how we've always talked about the Big Finish audio productions. And, you know, I one of the things that hold me back a little bit was not just the breadth of them, but also it can get expensive buying all those audio productions. Well, Big Finish has made available hundreds of their productions, their Doctor Who productions, on Spotify for free. So if you have Spotify, and you don't necessarily have to have pay for Spotify to get it. If you have a free Spotify account, you can access these as well. So I'll put a link in the show notes. The VHSHoovian.com blog put together this big index of all the free Big Finish stuff on Spotify, and there's lots.
Yeah. Now, it should be pointed out, this stuff is not their most recent. So if you want to hear the most recent Big Finish stuff, you'll need to go to Big Finish and buy it. But this is essentially their early years catalog. They've got the first 50 of the monthly Doctor Who adventures that they released. They feature actors like Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, and Paul McGann. They also have a bunch of their spin-off series like Cyberman and Dalek Empire and Iris Wildtime and Davros and things like that. But it's not their most recent stuff, but it is a lot of stuff, and a lot of it is well worth listening to.
Yeah, and especially if you want to, see what's it like. If you've never listened to stuff like that before, it's a nice way to get an introduction to it as well.
My understanding is you can sign up for a free Spotify account and listen to it, so you don't need to actually pay for this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, without paying for Spotify, you don't get things like access to it, like in your car. You have to be like at home on your Wi-Fi or on Wi-Fi somewhere. I think it's some limitation like that.
Yeah.
I don't have a paid music account. I have all the music I want to listen to on CDs that I ripped many years ago. I'm an old man. So that said, let's get into talking about Attack of the Cybermen, the 6th Doctor story, Colin Baker, and this is the 3rd, I think, episode of Colin Baker's time, but the 1st of the next season. Right. Am I correct?
Yeah. It's the 3rd appearance, but because he appears at just the very end of Caves of Androzani. And then there's the Twin Dilemma, and I believe this is the next one.
Yes. Well, yeah, this is the one after Twin Dilemma was the last of the previous season.
Oh, okay. I thought there was one in between, but I must be wrong. Okay, no, you're right. I had been mistaken. So this is his post-regeneration madness story, except maybe
No. This is post-regeneration madness. As he says in this episode, I am as stable as you're going to see me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which apparently is not very.
Right.
So a couple other things that make this episode notable, which is sort of production things. It was the first Doctor Who story to be produced in 45-minute episodes.
Mm-hmm.
There was a previous story, Resurrection of the Daleks, that was aired in a 45-minute format, but was basically 2 episodes jammed together. I think that's how they did it.
Right. Yeah.
But this was the first 45, and then they did it, I think, one more time, and then didn't do it again until New Who, which has all been 45-minute or so episodes.
Interesting, that other story, that first story that was done, the 45-minute period, featured as a character who was in both of them, Lytton.
Right. So there's this character Lytton. So basically the plot is, the Doctor is trying to fix the TARDIS's chameleon circuit.
It does.
And it's so let's talk about that. We'll get to Lytton in a second. So fixes the chameleon circuit, and it's also the first time in Who that the chameleon circuit ever works, that we ever see the TARDIS in other shapes. The Doctor's TARDIS. Right. We've seen the Master's TARDIS in different shapes, but the Doctor's TARDIS.
And the Doctor's talked about, like, I remember there was an episode of Fourth Doctor where he's got the little computer that came out of the console, and he was doing different shapes, like it could be a pyramid and other things, but it never actually did it. Legopolis, there you go.
Right.
I knew it was one we had talked about.
And of course, the chameleon circuit, he doesn't quite get it right, and it keeps changing shapes into like a very flowery sort of Victorian dresser, a pipe organ. Is that the only 2 things?
And no, there's a third. It turns into like a big iron gate.
Yes, like a cemetery gate or something. Very strange. It was amusing. I have to say that bit was amusing, especially as they played the organ.
Toccata and fugue in D major.
Yes. So he's working on the chameleon circuit, and they end up in an interesting location on Earth, Foreman's Yard on Totter's Lane, which is where it all began. This was from the first Doctor, first episode, The Empty Child, where
Unearthly
the TARDIS.
Child.
Oh, sorry. Empty Child is the other one. Sorry.
Yeah.
The Unearthly Child. I knew it was wrong as soon as I said it. That was in this junkyard that Ian and Barbara followed Susan back to as she got into the TARDIS there. So they end up there. They don't say much about it. Like this they sort of just in passing.
The Doctor just kind of says, "This looks familiar. I've been here, kind of like I've been here before," and that's about it.
They do that again for like the 25th anniversary in Sylvester McCoy's time. They land in Totter's Lane. It's the exact same place, and they don't make a big deal about it. It's just kind of a wink for the fans who know about this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good location for them to film in to go back to.
And it's a nice nod. And actually, this episode has a bunch of nods.
Yes, it does.
Many more explicit to previous Who things. In addition to the initial episode, An Unearthly Child, we have the Resurrection of the Daleks references with the Lytton character. Mm-hmm. We also have a reference. This is set in 1985, which is when it was aired. And that's a year before the first Doctor, William Hartnell story, The 10th Planet, which first introduced the Cybermen, where we saw their original home planet, Mondas, destroyed. And that's set in 1986, along with the arrival of Halley's Comet, was also scheduled for 1986. So they have both Halley's Comet and references, plot-centric references to the 10th Planet here. We also have references to 2 Patrick Troughton Cyberman stories, Tomb of the Cybermen on their adopted home planet Telos, and The Invasion, where they had a base on the dark side of the moon that's mentioned in this episode. There's also a great little bit that just happens in passing on the dialogue level, where because of the Doctor's post-regeneration instability, he's been referring to Perry by the names of former companions. He's called her Susan and Zoe and Joe and even Jamie, she says. And he acknowledges that. And then she mentions he even referred to her as the terrible Zoden. And Zoden is an in-joke among the writers. Zoden is first mentioned in the 20th anniversary episode, The Five Doctors, by Patrick Troughton's doctor. And the thing is, we always hear about Zoden, but we never get to see her. She never appears on camera. And apparently she had an encounter with multiple incarnations of the Doctor at once, and his memories of the event are all scrambled. So as a result, we get these crazy little bits of information about whatever happened with Zoden. But in this episode, the Doctor says, "Oh, they don't make villains like her anymore."
Because they never made a villain like her in the first place. Okay. That was okay. I was confused about that. I was going to ask you guys about that one because I have not seen that story. So thank you for explaining Zoden to me. So we also we'll eventually, I'm sure we'll get to Resurrection of the Daleks, but that's probably quite a ways off from now. So could you give me a little bit about Lytton, what he was in Resurrection of the Daleks, because he has an important role in a key role in this one, where we think he's a bad guy and he turns out not to be such a bad guy. What was he in Resurrection of the Daleks?
He's from a race, and they're from a place that has this ridiculous set of names. It's like I'll have to look it up. I'll bring it up later. But can't be worse than the Slovene. Oh no, it's not ridiculous in that sense. It's ridiculous in another sense.
Okay.
But he's basically from a race of mercenaries, and so they'll work for anybody who'll hire them. And previously, he was forced into working for the Daleks. It wasn't by his choice, but because he was working for the Daleks, the Doctor doesn't trust him, and as Perry says at the end of this, he never let him get a word in to explain what he was really doing in this. And it turns out he's not working for the bad guys. He's actually double-crossing the bad guys and working for the good guys.
Oh, okay. Yes. So in this one, he's double-crossing the bad guys.
Yeah, he was from Riften 5, which is a satellite orbiting Vita 15. And of course, there's a big long list of, what galaxy is this in and all that. But
solar system 0620 or something like that. Now, I can forgive the numerical reference to the solar system because they actually have those. But Vita 15, okay, that would make it the 15th planet in this solar system. Like Earth is Sol 3, the third planet in the solar system. So, okay, I can kind of buy that. But why do satellites have numbers? I guess it could be an artificial satellite, but Rifkin 5, it sounds, I assumed when I first heard it, this is a moon. Right. And moons shouldn't have numbers like that.
Right. But they specifically said satellite, so this is probably the replacement for Babylon 5. Oh wait, different universe.
Yeah. But the way they set it up, it sounded like they were talking about a moon, a natural satellite.
Yeah. Someone decided we need sci-fi names, and that's sounded like a sci-fi name to them.
Just stick a number on anything, no matter how inappropriate.
Yes, just like about 20 odd years ago, everything was blank 2000 to show how advanced and futuristic it was.
That's why my Twitter handle is Jimmy Akin 3000.
Yeah, that'll be good for another 1900 years.
Yeah,
plus. So that's Lytton. We also have the cyber controller from Tomb of the Cybermen. So we have this. So the basic plot is the Cybermen have come to Earth in 1985, ahead of their first encounter with the First Doctor, to change history, to kill humanity, so that when Mondas shows up, humans won't be able to defeat the Cybermen of that time.
Right.
Now,
so Mondas will survive.
Okay, so I get that. I'm a little confused about the second half of the story, which takes place on Telos, which was the planet we saw in the Patrick Troughton story, The Tomb of the Cybermen. We talked about that just recently. And for someone, now, what was going on in Telos? Why were the Cybermen there? And when did that take place? Before or after the Patrick Troughton story?
Before.
Because that's my question.
Because Yeah, I say it was before because, they talk about blowing off the surface of the planet and all the Cryons being dead. Well, we know the Cryons weren't there at the time of Tomb of the Cybermen. Now, at least we didn't see them, but you can imply that they weren't there. I'm going to make a counter case, but go ahead. Okay. So, I mean, I guess the way I like I said, I look at it was, they're trying to basically, irradiate the planet so that nothing could live there, so that the Cybermen could be entombed for however long. Because they talk about how they had to be entombed to save their power. And of course, at Tomb of the Cybermen, we see them being woken up after that had happened.
Right. Although some Cybermen were in some sort of suspension in this story. Mm-hmm. So some of them were already in suspension.
What I read, and I haven't followed this up rigorously, but what I read was that this is meant to occur after Tomb of the Cybermen. The original sequence of events was you had the Cryons, who were this kind of shimmering feminine crystalloid race living on Telos as its native race. And then the Cybermen came in. This much everybody agrees on. The Cybermen came in. They took over the planet. The Cryons had to go into hiding because their body temperature is such that if they go on the surface, now that the Cybermen have, I guess, heated it up, they'll boil, they'll die. They have super low body temperatures. And so they can't survive in human livable temperatures. Wherever they can live, humans are like freezing cold. And so that's why we didn't see them in Tomb of the Cybermen, because they couldn't go up on the surface. Now they're trying to deal with the Cybermen invasion by making the planet uninhabitable for the Cybermen also. And that's their objective in this episode. They're also trying to just blow up the Cybermen to the extent they can.
See, and this dispute highlights one of the big problems with this episode, which is it never is clear exactly what, where this fits. If they're trying to make this connection to Tomb of the Cybermen, but never explained to us, is it before, is it after? And the story is a bit muddled. Because
I think they probably do. It just goes by so fast that is implicit enough that it's hard. It's easy to miss out on or be confused about.
Or it's too implicit.
I could have missed it, but I just got the feeling it was before. Although looking on the TARDIS Wikia, it does say that a history of the universe sets it at 2530, which is after Tomb of the Cybermen. And then it's redated to 2495 based on evidence from the Cybermen audio series. Okay. So this does say that it is after the. It seemed more.
Mm-hmm. I know. Yeah. Initially, I was wondering too. So it's something that they don't make as clear as they could.
Right.
Okay.
we also have, and since we have Tomb of the Cybermen, we have Lytton referring to their freezing chambers as tombs. Yeah. They actually look a little more tomb-like this time around, and we have the classic "gotta have it" Cyberman breaking out of a tomb shot. This time, there's only one of them. But what's nice about it is there's a human standing right in front of the tomb when it happens, and that human gets grabbed.
Very much a horror movie sort of vibe there. So what is with the renegade Cybermen? That was something that kept coming up, was that the Cyber Control talking about Cybermen that are getting out of control. And we see the Doctor encountered one, and the other Cybermen encountered one. This Cybermen that are out of control. What was that part of the Cryons' interference, messing with the Cybermen?
I think it had different causes. Some of it was just random malfunction, from what we can tell. Some of it may have been problems waking up from being asleep. Part of it was this plan that these partially cyberized workers had going. So one of the things we see going on the surface of Telos is a kind of prison camp like environment where we have some apparent humans being forced to do mining labor. They've got pickaxes and they're mining something out of the surface of the planet with Cyberman guards standing around. We later learn that these workers are themselves partially cyberized, which is one of the things I want to talk about in a bit. But they, for some reason, couldn't be fully converted, and so they're being used as slave labor. And some of them rebel, and they attack their cyber guards, knock their heads off. In fact, or one of their heads off. In fact, there's a startling number of
beheadings,
of cyber decapitations. In this episode, lots of heads get knocked off. And the plan is and this is actually, there's a lot of good body horror in this. But the plan is, now that they've knocked this cyber head off, they're going to, quote unquote, clean it out, i.e. take the dead head that's in there out. And then one of the workers will dress in a cyber suit and wear the cyber helmet and pretend to escort another worker into cyber control. And so they interpret this as, and there's some disputing that goes on between the two workers, but they interpret part of this as, it's another rogue Cyberman. So I think that on the plot level, the reason they've got some of these rogue Cybermen is to explain for the viewer what's happening here, so that the Cybermen don't automatically see through the ruse.
Yeah, that dynamic between those two escaping prisoners was somewhat amusing, but somewhat annoying at the same time.
Yeah.
The bickering. Oh my gosh, the bickering.
It's kind of like C-3PO and R2-D2, only more prison campy and murderousy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Less cute, more annoying. But this one guy just kept berating this other guy the entire time, and it was just like, I started to feel bad for the
I was going to say that. I'm surprised the other guy didn't say, yeah, fine, you're on your own.
Yeah,
I'm out of here.
You put the helmet on.
Yeah.
Speaking of bickering, so we have Perry is still getting used to the new doctor. So I have to be honest, I tried to look up Perry's background and see like her whole story as companion, and I find it very confusing because we have multiple storyline Perrys.
Right. Right now, Perry is very new. This is like her third and fourth adventure. And we don't really know much about her, except she's an American and has a family somewhere.
Right.
And that's about it.
I think they've basically said she's from California, but that's about as far as they've gone.
Right. Right. So we have this. So, she went from, nice fifth doctor to the guy who was trying to strangle her an episode ago.
Yeah, it was sort of like Clara squared.
Yeah. But I have to say, they bicker like so much, and it's not like fun banter like between the 10th Doctor and Donna. It's bickering, and Perry's just like, she's always looks so scared and uncertain, and it I don't know, it's not fun. I mean, I suppose this is part of what you guys have talked about before. The problems with the Sixth Doctor is he comes across as just sort of mean all the time and not fun.
And Perry is just shrieking at him frequently in this. She's not being a fun companion. Now, eventually, so after this season, the rest of this season, by the way, is in the 45-minute mold. And then they kind of go on hiatus for a while. And when we see them again, when they come back, they've retooled the characters a little bit so that it's become clear that the Doctor and Perry are getting along better now. They've become friends.
Okay.
So eventually that happens. And Perry, like the Sixth Doctor, grows a lot in Big Finish.
Sure.
So eventually there's some redemption, but at this stage in their relationship, it's pretty annoying.
Okay. All right. Yeah. One of her big things is, like we said before, she's very concerned the Doctor is unstable, that he has not settled down. Again, she has no prior experience with regeneration, so she wouldn't know, about regeneration madness. But her concern is the Doctor is sort of kind of weird all the time.
Suddenly,
yeah. Right. So that plays a big role in the whole story. I by the end of it, I'm wondering, why doesn't she just say, "Take me home"? Like, this is not fun for me. I'm not enjoying my travels with you. Take me home. I don't know.
Well, it would have been hard for them to do that because they just did that with a previous companion. That's how Tegan left during the time of the Fifth Doctor.
Right. And that would, I could see that from a story, a plot level, or a overall arching level. That would be a problem. One of the things that we didn't mention in the talk about the background is the writer of the story is pseudonymous. It's listed as Paula Moore, but there is no actual Paula Moore.
Correct.
In fact,
the reason that, and in fact, this has more mystery about who actually wrote this thing than any other Doctor Who episode. We know it seems to have been a combination of three people. One of them is Paula Woolsey. Another is Eric Sayward, who was the script editor on the series. And the third is Ian Levine, who was a fan advisor of the series. And there's a dispute about who did how much. It seems pretty clear that Eric Sayward wrote the main script. And the reason he did that, the reason they came up with this Paula Moore pseudonym, was because under British union rules, script editors were not allowed to edit their own scripts. And so Sayward needed to produce a script for filming. And this is actually something that happens a lot. This happened on Star Trek too. But Sayward needed to have a script, and so he didn't have anybody else who could write it for him, so he wrote it. But then for union rules and apparently to hide it from John Nathan Turner, the showrunner, at least I saw that in claimed in one source, they used this pseudonym to get around the problem. What's disputed is how much actual input did Paula Woolsey and Ian Levine have. Paula Woolsey may have had a little bit or none, and she may have just lent her name to the project or her first name to the project. Ian Levine, who's kind of a shady character a little bit, who's has some critics as having harmed the show during this era, has claimed that he had more substantial involvement at the pre-script level, but Sayward has denied that and said he had very little involvement.
And to muddy the stew even earlier, or muddy the pot, whatever it is, even more.
Water.
It was, thanks, muddy the waters. The pot, the stew. It must be lunchtime. The Paula Woolsey was Eric Sayward's ex-girlfriend as well. That he may, and so he may have routed the script through her to get around those union rules as well. So yeah, just lots of fun. Now, I mean, that this kind of disruption, this kind of chaos in the writers' room, among the producers, that sort of thing, is the sort of thing that doesn't show up necessarily directly on screen, but ends up indirectly affecting how shows go. And so the bad things that we see in this era of Doctor Who is, this is part of the evidence of why that is like that.
Yeah. Sometimes it can produce really good art. In Star Trek, for example, the classic episode Yesterday's Enterprise was the result of oh no, what are we going to do? We've got to have a script and we don't have one. We've got to bang something out super fast. And it gave us a classic. But other times, most of the time, it gives us substandard stuff.
Yeah.
Where that problem tends to happen is toward the end of series. As we get farther into it, we start running out of scripts towards the end. But here, it's the very first one in the series.
Right. The very first episode of the whole season. That's not a good sign.
I wanted to comment on the body horror in this.
Yeah, let's do that.
I'm a longstanding fan of the original Mondasian Cybermen because it's so obvious that's a human in a suit. And the Cybermen in this, except for their heads, are pretty human looking. It's clear that's just a flexible suit with a person in it. It's not as obvious as the Mondasian Cybermen because the heads are different. but it's still pretty clear that's a human in a suit. And one of the things they do in this to amp up the body horror is we see partial Cybermen in this series. There's like in Cyber Control, there's a partially converted Cyberman just standing in an alcove in the back in multiple scenes. Never has any lines, but you see his bare human skin with metal bits added to him. And that's effective at reminding us what's going on, especially with all the decapitations happening. Then we learned that the workers, and I love how when two of them try to escape, the others just ignore them and keep working.
Right.
Which is cool. But we later learned the workers themselves are partially upgraded Cybermen. So like one of them has a cyber hand and cyber forearm that we previously had not seen. And so that gives us more body horror. The reference to cleaning out the head so they can use it as a helmet is body horror. And then at the end, Lytton is partially cyberized. He's in the process of being turned into a Cyberman when the story comes to its climax. And he's even talking about how they're feeding a drug into him that's destroying his brain and he can feel it. And it's like, this is pretty good body horror here. Also, they really play on the strength of the Cybermen because they're part mechanical with those cyber hands and stuff. And they ramp it up slowly. Initially, in episode 1 of the 2 parts, the cyber leader is like poking Lytton's shoulder, and Lytton is resisting being poked. He's just standing there resisting the poke, and you can get the implication this is a super strong poke, and he's really fighting to not be pushed back. Then later, one of Lytton's aides is mouthing off to the Cyberman, and he's like using this mock cyber voice. It's like, things don't seem to be going well. And one of the Cybermen comes up and makes 2 fists and puts them on the aide's temples on his head and just presses. And you can tell the guy's in pain. And they keep stepping it up until eventually we have this scene in Cyber Control on Telos where you have these 2 Cybermen squeezing Lytton's hands until they're bloody.
Yeah,
which was criticized by, and normally they don't. I was surprised because normally you don't see blood on a British program, especially a children's program. They're very much more squeamish about that than we are in America. And you have these bloody fists, and I thought it was very effective.
Yeah,
I thought it conveyed the alienness of the Cybermen.
It was surprising, although it's not like they showed spurting blood. It was sort of suddenly. Yeah, there was blood on his hands. Yeah. Which I don't know if that was supposed to be symbolic as well. Well, speaking of the violence aspect, I mean, the doctor at the end there, jumping around on the floor, shooting Cybermen like a James Bond character.
It is a definite contrast from the peacenik doctor of New Who, where I don't ever touch guns. I don't want anything to do with guns. It's like, he's constantly having a gun in this one.
And Peter Davison did too. I mean, he had a blaster up to a Cyberman's chest and shot him in the chest, at point blank millimeter range.
Yeah, there was and I think it could be easily explained other than the obvious political statements the writers are making and the showrunners are making with Doctor Who, but with the Time War, where after the war he wants to see no more violence. He does not want to participate in violence anymore. So I mean, I think that's a logical path that you could take. The obvious practical aspect is you've got showrunners who want a peacenik doctor instead of a doctor who's going to carry a gun. Because you've got Perry, packing a pistol. You've got that one scene that was rather brutal where the guy took the pistol right to the face of the Cyberman and started pulling the trigger. I mean, that was incredible. Yeah. That was amazing that they would show that.
By the way, who that is? So that character is called Russell. He's a policeman, and that's working undercover. He's been sent to infiltrate Litton's group, who they think are bank robbers. They don't realize they're alien mercenaries. They think they're just ordinary bank robbers.
Right.
And Russell is played by an actor named Terry Malloy. And this is Terry Malloy's only role on Doctor Who where he gets to show his face. Otherwise, he's the main guy playing Davros.
Right.
He was the last one in Classic Who, because he was the third actor to play it.
Right. He's not the first guy to play Davros, but he's the one who comes back most frequently. And so it's neat to think, wow, this ordinary looking bloke here, policeman guy, would-be bank robber guy, that's Davros without the makeup.
Yeah, he was in Resurrection of the Daleks, Revelation of the Daleks, Remembrance of the Daleks, and Attack of the Cybermen. Apparently, they made a promise to him that if he did the Davros roles, he could show up with his real face in one episode.
Of course, it's kind of funny. I love those titles because we got frustrated with New Who, where everything was a something of the Doctor. Yes. Time of the Doctor and Day of the Doctor and Night of the Doctor and Name of the Doctor. Well, they had a point when it was of the Daleks, of the Daleks, of the Cybermen, of the Cybermen, of the
of
this
the
is not a new thing.
Yeah. So one thing about the Cybermen that I found interesting is they were much more emotional than we've seen them other times. I mean, they were at times angry, curious. I don't know. You'd say they were happy, but there was much more emotion in them than I'm used to.
Despite having the explicit anti-emotion rhetoric of emotions are a weakness, they're basically Vulcans. They've got emotions. They need something to get them out of bed in the morning. They just have this ideology that prevents them from recognizing that reality.
But there's definitely gloating on the part of the cyber controller at points and stuff like that.
Right. Another little bit that I noticed was references. The sonic screwdriver was referenced as a sonic lance throughout this episode.
Yeah, that's because they destroyed the sonic screwdriver during Peter Davison's time. They thought they were becoming overly dependent on it. And they wanted the Doctor to take a more hands-on approach to solving problems rather than just waving his magic wand. And so they got rid of the sonic screwdriver. Peter Davison's Doctor commented it felt like you've killed a friend. Yeah. And that was actually a Cyberman episode, wasn't it?
It was a Cyberman who shot it.
Yeah, I believe it was in the one where Adric dies.
I think you're right.
But then they experimented with bringing it back with the sonic lance in this episode, although all he really does with it is cut stuff.
Yeah.
He doesn't use it in quite the same way. But
he uses it as a weapon at one point. Jamming it into a Cyberman. Yeah.
But then they destroy it by the end of the episode when they use it to set off the magical unobtainium.
Yeah.
But that only works when it heats up.
Right.
But they don't bring the lance back in the series, as far as I am aware.
Okay. Yeah, I actually had an interesting discussion over the weekend with another fan about the new Doctors, the 13th Doctor's sonic screwdriver, which we've seen pictures of, and how it looks like a magic wand, and that's not what the sonic screwdriver is. I'm like, I hate to disagree, but maybe early on it was an actual tool, it was an actual screwdriver in Classic Who. But it's essentially a magic wand for the writers to kind of make it whatever they need it to be in this episode.
Yeah, it went from basically being a sonic tool that could screw and unscrew screws to a supercomputer that the three Doctors in the 50th anniversary episode could use to calculate the exact
the harmonic
structure, resonance of the door over the course of 2,000 years or whatever it was.
Right, exactly.
Before checking to see if the door was even locked.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. And there is a defensible argument, it's a reasonable defense to say with today's shows that are only 45 minutes long, having the sonic screwdriver function like a magic wand helps move the plot along, given the running time constraints that we have to deal with.
Yes, that's true. That is true. The Sonic Lance, may it rest in peace. At least they weren't Sonic sunglasses.
Yep.
And then the only other note I had was on Halley's Comet. Just an interesting, just to kind of point out for folks who are younger than us, how big a deal Halley's Comet was in 1986.
Oh, I remember it's flame out.
Yeah. Well, it was like Y2K. Everybody was like, Halley's Comet is coming. It's a big deal. And, it's only once every, 79?
76 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Yep. So some people are alive today. We'll see the next one. And, it was such a huge deal. And so it's funny that they would incorporate that into this show. Now we're watching it 30 years plus later. And it's like, oh yeah, is there a comet? Like, if you weren't from, alive in that era, you kind of maybe have a vague notion of a
just think it's only halfway on its trip around the sun. It'll be back here in another 30 some years, 40 years.
So here's my thing about comets. Sometimes they are really spectacular, and we have these close approaches with a comet that's got the huge tail and it's visible in the daylight and it's amazing. And I want to see one of those. But thus far in my life, this has not happened.
Yeah.
They keep promising it. I remember when I was a kid and they discovered Comet Kohoutek that was going to be passing by in 1974. And they said, oh, it's going to be amazing. You're going to see it in the daytime. No, total flame out. And then it's like, oh, the last time Halley's Comet was here, it was wicked awesome. It's going to be amazing in 1986. No, total flame out. They keep, it's just a few years ago, 2 or 3 comets in 1 year. Yep. They're going to be amazing. No, they were nothing. I want to see a big, honking, spectacular comet.
All I can say is be careful what you ask for, because dinosaurs may have been exterminated by a big honking comet that you can see during the daytime. Oh,
I remember Morgan Freeman in Deep Impact.
Yeah,
and we don't have Bruce Willis to send up to drill into the comet to blast it.
And we got a few Park space shuttles they can use.
Just remember, asteroids are nature's way of saying, how's that space program going?
One of these days we should do an episode of Secrets of Movies and TV on Armageddon, and we could talk about whether it's easier to train astronauts to be miners than it is to train miners to be astronauts. But that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
So that's all I have. Do you guys have any last thoughts on Attack of the Cybermen?
I have a few little notes.
Sure.
There's one point where the Doctor is he turns on the TARDIS's self-destruct device, which we haven't seen before, to my knowledge, in order to get the Cybermen to back down. And he actually lets it count down to 1 before stopping, which is a cliche, but the way they play it's like comedy. Perry's having to tell him, Doctor, the self-destruct is still on, and he suddenly shuts it off at 1, and it's like played for comedy based on the kind of irritability and foolishness of this Doctor. And so even though it's a cliche, I like the way they played that. It's nice to see it done not as drama, which no one can take seriously these days, going all the way down to 1.
Right.
But to see it played another way. I like the fact the Cryons are not called Telosians.
Yes.
It's nice to have, just like we humans are not Earth, we don't call ourselves Earthians.
Yeah.
That's a nice touch to have the race named differently than the place they come from. I thought the makeup on the Cryons was interesting. It's kind of low budget, but they're really trying to make them look aliens, and they have these, I don't know, it's like a lot of it looks like it's made out of clear plastic and cellophane.
Right.
And so they have these like cellophane walrus mustaches on these women actors playing the Cryons. And they have, I thought at first they were bubble wrap. They have these collars that are like discs around their necks. They look kind of like the old frills that people used to wear in the 1700s or whatever, except they're just flat discs. And at first I thought they were made out of bubble wrap, but they seem to be too stiff for that. So it's either reinforced bubble wrap or more likely some kind of just plastic they found that they could cut into these shapes. Mm-hmm. But I thought that was interesting. I liked they all have these really long white fingers on their hands with big long fingernails, and they're constantly waving their fingers about. It's like their race has this tick with their hands
or touching. There's a lot of touching.
Well, that's where I was going next. Is they're constantly, like when they're around Perry, they're constantly touching her on the shoulders. They're constantly touching the doctor on the shoulders, and so I'm guessing since this must be like a vacuum behavior, like raccoons, they just instinctively wash things even though they don't know why, and the cryons are instinctively touching things. But if what they say about their metabolism is true, that they can't survive above freezing,
right?
Then you shouldn't be touching these blazing hot humans.
Exactly. Or surrounding them or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. You're asking to burn your fingers there at least. So I like that. I thought that was interesting. One of the things they establish at one point in the show is that Cybermen have an alert in their heads that will trigger a response by other Cybermen to come get an injured one. Yeah. And we see that only in this one scene. So like with all the decapitations and other attacks and disablings going on, why don't any of the other disabled guards' head alerts go off?
Oh, maybe when the head comes off, it disables the distress beacon, which seems to be a design flaw.
You think that'd be the exact time you'd want the distress beacon.
Maybe the distress beacon shouldn't be in the head; it should be in the chest.
Yeah, that would be good too.
Well, that was always my question about androids of all stripes in various sci-fi: is why is the most important part in the appendage that sticks up above everything else? Right. Why isn't it in the most protected part? But because it's an android, it could be anything.
Right.
But,
right. Let's see. I noticed that whether the cryons are able to go in particular areas of their own complex, it seems random. Like the cryon leader cannot go out into the hallway from the chamber with the explosive unobtainium, but others are running around in the tomb area, no problem. And so I can only conclude that different parts of the cyber control complex are heated and others are not. They have the cyber leader's name is Flast, Flast.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a command you'd use in some kind of primitive coding, Flast. But this is, to my mind, one of the worst Doctor Who fake names I've ever encountered. I'm used to monosyllabic things like Trask and Fisk and stuff like that, but Flast is particularly uneuphonious.
Yes.
And then lastly, we have the outline or the final line from Colin Baker from the Doctor saying about Lytton, "I don't think I've misjudged anybody quite as badly as I did Lytton." And it's kind of like they're milking the Lytton the hero thing too much there at the end, because it's like, oh, he was such a good guy after all, and we misjudged him, and you didn't let him get a word in edgewise, Doctor. And they didn't set that up properly, if that's what they were going for.
Right. I mean, it's sort of, oh, well, I guess he's dead.
Yeah.
That's too bad. I guess I misjudged him. There was no emotion. I mean, there was a little bit, but it was played too straight. Yeah. If you're going to do it, you've got to do it.
I did overall, though. I liked this two-parter much better than I thought I would. This is one that somehow previously I had missed. I had it in my collection and just had not watched it. Hadn't realized I hadn't watched it. Right. But I enjoyed it much more than I normally do. Colin Baker. I thought it was a nice adventure story with some nice concepts. We have all the running around on Earth in part one with the bank robbery plot that turns out to not be about bank robbery. We have the running around on Telos. We have lots of connections to other episodes. So I thought it was much more enjoyable than I expected.
Yeah, the one thing that I kept coming back to is how are they going to crash Halley's Comet into Earth. I don't remember them actually explicitly telling us what the plot, how that was going to work.
I don't think they said anything about crashing Halley's Comet. They just said that they were going to go back in time and kill off humans. I don't think they said anything about the Comet.
They said they were going to use the Comet. I assumed they would do it because Mondas has a planetary drive,
which they mentioned in the episode.
Which they mentioned. So I would assume they just slap a planetary drive on Halley's Comet and drive it into the Earth.
Okay. All right. Maybe, I guess, yeah. They just, again, they didn't.
What they needed was the time capsule to get to the right point in time to do that.
Right. That's what it was.
Although, since it's a year out, why don't you just do it now?
Well, maybe their planetary drive doesn't work that fast. I don't know.
It takes time to get enough Cybermen to actually do the work, maybe. I don't know.
Yep.
So they had to do it, get there a little early.
One interesting thing was the policemen. That was one thing I forgot to mention earlier. In the first episode, we have these two policemen that are sort of stalking both Lytton and the Doctor and Perry at different points. And it turns out that they're Cybermen, except they're not cyberized at all. I mean, so there's something about them that they're still in completely human form, but their brains have been changed. That I wasn't clear on.
It's probably something like the that episode with the Cybermen and New Who, where they had the earbuds that control them, something like that.
Yeah, or the hidden Daleks when the stock comes out of their forehead.
Yep.
Or the Daleks had in the classic series people who were called Robomen that were basically humans with a headset on that made you a servant of the Daleks. And this seems to be something similar to that. Right. It could be that they're fully cyberized on the inside, but they've been left with a human skin as camouflage.
That is some interesting, more body humor.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's it for us. I mean, we've had a good discussion on that. So what did you, the listener, think of this Sixth Doctor story, Attack of the Cybermen? Let us know. Go to sqpn.com/Doctor Who and find the show there and leave us a comment, or go to the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page and leave us some feedback. You can also send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. And we also really would appreciate it, especially as we're doing new episodes and new series and all that sort of stuff, new season. If you could go to iTunes, leave us some feedback there, write a review, give us a 5-star review. That would be very nice. What that will do is as people are looking to talk about Doctor Who and listen to podcasts about it, it will help expose this podcast to others and grow our audience. And that's all. That benefits all of us to do that. You can find links to our personal social media and our websites, and that link to the Big Finish on Spotify on our show notes on sqpn.com. Until next time, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me in sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Glad to be here, and thanks, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening, and remember, unstable? This is me, Perry. At this very moment, I'm as stable as you'll ever see me. Which I think was the problem.
When will I see you again?
Soon, I expect. Or later. One of those.